I realize that there's going to be no shortage of videos this week that relate to the recently retired UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov. But even with that being the case, I found it nearly impossible not to be drawn into the ongoing swell of praise that has surrounded the Eagle in the wake of his 29th and seemingly final bout. So the question for me, I suppose, is what can I offer or bring to the table to make this dive into Khabib stand out? And to be honest, I don't even know if I have the right answer to that question, but I can indeed speak about my own experiences following Nurmagomedov over the years. Well before his emergence as a bona fide global superstar, the name Khabib Nurmagomedov came to my attention from a single YouTube comment left on a video relating to then lightweight champion Anthony Showtime Pettis. Now I can't remember exactly what the video itself was, but in that specific comment section, in the middle of a largely pro-Pettis audience, one lone commenter was not impressed. "Just you wait until the Eagle Khabib Nurmagomedov returns to the lightweight division." That was all it said, and it was all I needed for my curiosity to take over. At the time, it would be another 2 years before I would begin working in MMA media. I was merely a fan of the sport, hungry to discover the ins and outs of this constantly changing battleground. So I decided to go digging. At that time, Khabib had been sidelined due to a string of injuries that caused the 2-year gap that fell between his destruction of Rafael dos Anjos and his eventual return against Darrell Horcher. My first experience with Khabib brought me to his showdown with Abel Trujillo back in 2013. I had no knowledge of Trujillo or his merits as a threat to Khabib, but it was in those 15 minutes that I first understood what this man was all about. To any of you who have not watched the contest, I would urge you to seek it out. It was classic Khabib, and boy, what an introduction it was. I didn't know what I know now about the sport and the various nuances that make it what it is, but even still, I was blown away by this man's control over what should have been a volatile showdown. Trujillo was clearly athletic as hell, and yet, over 3 rounds, I watched as Nurmagomedov sapped the life out of him, one takedown at a time. Even to me, this was another level of dominant grappling. It was as clear as day. He pressured Trujillo from the opening bell, almost to the point of recklessness. In this unrefined early stage of his early career, Khabib was dogged, he was vicious. He was throwing himself into the fire at every opportunity, proving at every turn that he was willing to swim deeper than his opponent. A UFC record of 21 successful takedowns would see Trujillo broken down to the point that all he could do was wave his arms in the air helplessly as Khabib threw him again to the mat, as if to say, what the hell am I supposed to do here? I was hooked, I was on board. To this day, I've never seen a fight like it, where a fighter, a born warrior, was so broken by his opponent's prowess that he gradually wilted to such an extent that victory seemed impossible. And it wasn't just that, it was the expression of pure timidity, Trujillo throwing his arms up into the air for everyone to see. That wasn't for his coaches, that wasn't for the fans or the cameras, that was a very pure moment that in many ways would stand as the ultimate foreshadowing of what would come. Of course, I would dig deeper and watch all of his other matchups up until that point, both within the UFC and beforehand. I remember being awed by the way he dismantled Rafael dos Anjos, a fighter whose skills I was well aware of. Also his impressive knockout of Thiago Tavares, another fighter who I had come across at the time. At that point, his status as the boogeyman of the 155-pound division was set in stone for me, and that stray comment on that Anthony Pettis video made perfect sense. I've heard the expression used to describe knockout artists before. Francis Ngannou just took that guy's soul, or something to that effect. It's a pretty sentiment, but until I saw Khabib fight for the first time, I didn't see it fully realized in MMA. That look that came across Trujillo's face was the same one that was written on the faces of Edson Barboza, of Conor McGregor, and most recently of Justin Gaethje. He didn't merely beat these men, he made it crystal clear to each and every one of them that they were completely and utterly inferior on the night. Khabib Nurmagomedov didn't just beat his 29 career opponents, he gave them a full presentations of the levels that exist in this sport. And for my money, while Khabib simply doesn't have the resume to compete with the likes of John Jones and Georges St. Pierre, I have never seen a fighter elevate himself to such an extent. That might be the single greatest mixed martial artist who ever walked the planet. It's a matter of preference, of course, but all the greats looked human at one point or another. Whether they were pushed to the brink by a challenger in a fight that went down to the wire, or rocked by a shot that forced them to dig deep, the greats have all been dragged down to the realms of us mere mortals on at least one occasion or another. Khabib's human moments have come down to the smallest of instances, a handful of shots landed, a single round stolen. He just did not look human in there for the most part. It says a lot when the cherry pickers are forced to resort to standards that are as unique as that. There's a lot of discussion over the ever-present GOAT conversation going around right now. I think it's all subjective, and to be honest, it's a bit of a tired subject at this point. For me, Khabib stands as the definitive divide between the titles of greatest mixed martial artists of all time and the common standards we hold our GOAT to. I can't say that he was a better champion than the likes of Jones, St. Pierre, Johnson, Aldo and Silva, but if you put a gun to my head and ask me who the single greatest example of a mixed martial artist we've ever seen in that octagon is, I believe that I could at the very least make a watertight argument for the Eagle. I'm not nailing my colours to any mast just yet, but take that for what it's worth. At UFC 254, Khabib's legacy was set in stone by another masterful display over the second best lightweight in the world right now. Sure, we didn't get the Tony Ferguson fight in the end, but Gaethje was the man at 155 pounds, of that there is no doubt. The history books will show that Khabib crushed his contemporaries with a level of dominance that was completely unheard of, and he did it with an approach that was uniquely his own. Fighters come along every now and again that change the game, fighters that force all others to sit up and take notice, to understand where the evolution of the sport is headed. Already you see Khabib's trademark Dagestani handcuff being used more and more, his approach to the takedown, his attitude towards the merits of pure control, his pressure, his pace. Not everybody is going to be able to pull it off, but make no mistake, the Khabib Nurmagomedov flavour will be felt in this sport for years to come. The natural progression of this game always sees the next generation rise up, knowing what they have learned from the era that preceded it. And to me, it is a great shame that Khabib won't be sticking around long enough to test his approach on fighters who rose through this game watching him, but in retiring at the top, he will bring his secrets out of the sport with him. 13-0 in the UFC. It was a relatively short run, all things considered, but in leaving it at that, as I'm sure he will, Khabib has taken power over the natural trajectory of this sport's greatest fighters. George St. Pierre indeed did something similar, albeit after a controversial decision against Johnny Hendricks towards the end of his dominant run. But for my money, there is a certain romance to the way Khabib fulfilled his father's wishes and left the sport on his own terms. I respect his commitment to the lightweight division. He didn't angle towards a super fight, even telling the great GSP to cut down to lightweight if he wanted to test his waters. Nurmagomedov was driven to become the greatest lightweight of all time, and in reality, he overperformed considerably in that goal. Let's not waste time though comparing what he did to his fellow greats. It's a tired topic that can never truly be resolved, and I know that all of you Khabib diehards in the comment section won't hear anything else. But I'm also a Khabib diehard. I've been watching this guy for years, and honestly, I've loved every second. There was no moment of his technical mastery that I found boring. No time where I found myself criticizing his striking technique or lamenting his constant takedown attempts. No, it was all thrilling. I was introduced to him as an unstoppable force of nature, and it has been nothing short of a pleasure to watch him going out there time and time again and proving himself to be great. Whether it was his trouncing of RDA, his mauling of Edson Barboza, taking a tricky short notice matchup against Al Iaquinta and showing off that jab just for the hell of it, and that back-to-back-to-back trio of submissions over Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, all of it served to confirm what a lot of us suspected when we first watched this man fight. Mixed martial arts was designed as a means of singling out one superior approach in a no-holds-barred fight, but over time it began to truly live up to its billing, becoming an amalgamation of every fighting style, serving up a cocktail of approaches that ended up embodying that famous Bruce Lee quote, "Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely your own." Khabib wasn't a specialist. He didn't have the singular approach of a Brazilian jiu-jitsu wizard like Damian Maia or a pure striker like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He took the MMA rule set and went out there and represented a fighting style that was, in fact, uniquely his own. He wasn't flying the banner of a martial art behind him. Indeed, he was a proficient sambo and judo specialist, but that fighting style was Khabib Nurmagomedov. And if he is in fact finished with the sport, it has been nothing short of a privilege to watch him grow and slowly perfect his craft. A beautiful career with an ending worthy of the highest praise. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. And as always, thank you for watching.